And a very pleasant, happy Monday. This is Pot Up with Shane Matthews. Johnny Cornell is in the seat today with Shane on assignment. He will be calling in probably in about 15 minutes. This is your podcast for all things sports related here in the North Central Florida area and in Gainesville and throughout the country. We are available to you on this podcast via Facebook Live and on YouTube. We also have a live number you can call in, or you can text at 352-353-7465. That's 352-353-7465. It is December the 16th, 2011. We're basically 2 weeks from the end of 2019, and we are 12 days away from the college football playoff semifinals, with 4 teams trying to win the national title for the year 2019. That will be held, that game, the national championship game, will be held in New Orleans on January the 7th or 8th, something like that. It's a Monday. They always play it on a Monday. This past weekend, we had quite a lot of college football news, even though there was only one game, and that was the game that I had the very lucky pleasure of going to. It was Army-Navy. Right up the road from Philadelphia, where we were watching that game, was the Heisman Trophy Heisman Trophy ceremony for the college football's best football player, voted by the Heisman voters. And I tell you, I didn't get to see that, and I was, I mean, there was no question who was going to win it. And it just so happens that not only did Joe Burrow win the Heisman Trophy, but he had a landslide victory, the biggest since O.J. Simpson won it way back. 90.7% of the ballots were cast for Joe Burrow, the Louisiana State quarterback. 1,846 points, which was the largest margin of victory since, as I said, O.J. Simpson. It was a crowning achievement for a quarterback who was transferred and had quite a rags to riches story, coming from Ohio and ending up in Louisiana, graduating with a degree in Ohio, and then moving down to Louisiana. I believe that's true. I mean, he could have gotten. I think he did graduate from Ohio State, and then he transfers to LSU. Sits out for 3 years, basically. He was a guy who was a backup quarterback with the Buckeyes under Urban Meyer in Ohio. J.T. Barrett was their starter. And then he was basically backing up, along with Dwayne Haskins, J.T. Barrett. And he lost that battle for the backup quarterback position at Ohio State when he broke his hand in 2017. And I believe that probably had to be, or he said was, the lowest point of his career, and then making that decision to move on and not bolt out of Ohio State, but then to later move on, graduate, then move on and go to LSU, becoming the third straight transfer quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy. And it seems like it could be somewhat of a trend. And the reason why I say that is because, well, we have Justin Fields, who was there in New York, transferring from Georgia to Ohio State this year, becoming their quarterback and leading them to the college football playoff. Then we have Jalen Hurts, who graduated from the University of Alabama, won a championship there, or was on a winning team that won the championship there, played in a few others, or in one other, and was on the roster of another. And then he transfers to Oklahoma, and he has a chance now to win the national championship if his team can beat LSU in the college football semifinal. Chase Young was a defensive player from Ohio State that finished second in the award-winning. Well, he didn't finish second, but he was the first defensive player to finish in the top 4. Joe Burrow was first. Hurts was second. He had 762 votes. Justin Fields had 747. Then Chase Young had 643. So he was the second Ohio State football player to be invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy celebration. And I'll tell you, it was a groundbreaking year for LSU football, but also, of course, for this Joe Burrow, who really was a rags to riches story. This guy had 48 touchdown passes. He only had 6 interceptions. He had 4,715 passing yards and was really the story of the season for LSU, and Ed Orgeron, who you could make a case for Coach of the Year, National Coach of the Year, and I guess he may have even won that. I don't even know if they've had that vote. If they had, I missed it, but it's really not missing much because he would be the guy you would obviously vote for with what they have done at LSU winning the SEC. But Burrow won this thing going away, and the heartbreak, the heartwarming story that he told of his path to the Heisman Trophy and his love for his coach has to make you really like the Heisman Trophy. And for me, that's what I loved most about the Heisman Trophy is when they talk about things after they get the win. The anticipation of who wins is, of course, big. It wasn't this year because we all knew Joe Burrow was going to win it. But the story he told afterwards and the way he laid his heart out there for his coach, Ed Orgeron, with his mother and father sitting right there next to him was quite remarkable, and it was really quite a year for him. I think the breakthrough moment for LSU happened very early in the season. It was in the second game against the Texas Longhorns in Austin, and I remember watching this and thinking, "Whoa, LSU's going to give folks like Alabama and Florida and teams in the SEC a much different look. They're going to be a team that throws the football and isn't conservative and tries to play it close to the vest. They're going to be a team that opens it up." And that's what Ed Orgeron did by enlisting Steve Ensminger as the offensive coordinator. And Joe Brady, of course, is the guy who comes in to coach the quarterback position and lead Joe Burrow and that offense. And the moment that I remember saying to myself, okay, they're going to give us a lot of trouble, us meaning my school, Alabama, and Florida, and people down the schedule, was when they had a 3rd and 17 against Texas, and they were up by just a few points, and they converted it. They threw 4 verticals straight down the field. They did not hold on to the ball and just play it close to the vest, running between the tackles. And they basically ran a 4-minute offense, slinging the ball downfield, and then ended up scoring a touchdown to put the Texas Longhorns to bed in that game in Austin, Texas. So that, to me, the second game of the year was the one win that I think let us all know that LSU and Joe Burrow were for real. And this kid is quite a player. I mean, he's a big kid. He can run. He can throw. We've all seen it. Congratulations to him. I really didn't know much about this guy until the season transpired, and you have to say this guy is quite a player. And certainly he did it a different way. He didn't just bolt because he didn't get to play the first year he was out there trying to win the job at Ohio State. He was essentially a backup for 3 years. He graduated, and then he used the transfer rules and maximized his opportunity to go to LSU and become a guy that the nation would then get to know. And LSU is in a position now that they haven't been in decades to win a national title. They will be considered a home team in both the semifinal and perhaps the final if they beat Oklahoma, which I can't imagine they won't, but you never know. It's college football, and Jalen Hurts is the kind of guy that doesn't die easily, as we know. But they are a 2-touchdown favorite in Atlanta, Georgia, against the Oklahoma Sooners. I can't imagine them not playing well in that game as they get ready in 12 days to play that game. And then, of course, we have the potential final for them in New Orleans. So it's just their year. Sometimes you just say, what's the story with college football? LSU is the story for college football. Now, Ohio State fans would beg to differ, and I'm sure Clemson fans, we haven't even really talked much about Clemson. They don't play a competitive schedule this year, or they didn't, and they are a kind of team that's lying in the weeds. And I'd say between those two games, that might be the one with the most anticipation, would be Clemson and Ohio State way out in Glendale. Now, here we are in the north end zone. That's the south end zone. We're on Pod Up with Shane Matthews, who's on assignment. He'll we hope to hear from him on the phone line. And that line is open to everybody at 352-353-7465. You can also text a message to the show at 352-353-7465. Joe Burrow, your national Heisman Trophy winner, the Heisman Trophy winner for 2019, 12 days now before the national semifinal. The other story in college football happened in Philadelphia, where I was lucky enough to be invited to go watch the Army-Navy experience. And I call it the Army-Navy experience, unlike the Army-Navy game, because when I was there, nobody talked about the game. Now, you had a 9-2 team playing a 5-6 team, I guess it was. They have a loser. Army's not bowl eligible. They did not get to a bowl. They only won 5 games. They had a bad middle part of the season, suffered some injuries, and so forth. But the game never really came up. I went to a restaurant, the oldest Irish restaurant in the city of Philadelphia, which, by the way, downtown is immaculate. I mean, it is clean. It is nice. It is well kept. Now, I can't say that for South Philly or the surrounding areas of Philadelphia, which looked like a third world country, frankly, driving from the airport to downtown, which is about a 20, 25-minute drive. $23 on Uber. No, not a big deal. Very easy to get from the airport to downtown. But, man, downtown was beautiful. It was beautiful. I loved it. And I my family's from Philadelphia, so I wanted to see what the place is like. My mom's side, anyway. So we're there in Philadelphia, and we're going to this old, it was called McGillen's, old tavern or something, McGillen's, about 4 blocks from the hotel where I was staying. And we walk in there, place is packed, Army, Navy guys everywhere. I mean, these guys are, people that are coming back to Philadelphia with their families to enjoy basically what amounts to is a family reunion, is what it felt like. And I had the pleasure of going with 2 friends that we've become very close with, my wife and I, here in Gainesville. And his name was Joe, and Joe was a track star at the Naval Academy, and he's a star. And so he competed in track and field and goes to this game every year and had some extras and said, hey, guys, we've got some extras. We've got a hotel set up for you. Just come on up to Philadelphia and enjoy the Army-Navy experience. What am I going to say no to that? Of course I'm going to go enjoy the Army-Navy experience, and that's what it is. It seemed to be much more of an experience and a reunion of sorts than it did a game. Now, the game for 3 hours was the main focus. It was, but you never really had any doubt who was going to win because of how the way these teams have gone throughout this year. Navy now finishes at 10-2. Last year, Navy was bad. I mean, they lost to Army. Army had won 3 years in a row. The senior class for the Army was playing to try to finish without having lost to Navy. And on the opposite side, of course, the Navy senior class was playing to try to get their first win over Army. So it was quite an event. They had a lot of things going on. There's McGillen's Irish Pub right there. I see. Good job there, Taylor. Here we go with the Army-Navy game at 3 o'clock. There's a rain. It's not bad. It's misty. It's cloudy. It feels like an NFC East or AFC East playoff game in January, although it wasn't as cold as I would think that might be. And there it was. Taylor, you found it. This is where we were. And the reason why this place was so special is there you see it. It's old, but it's the oldest Irish pub in Philly, as I said. And the weather was almost like out of Edgar Allan Poe movie. Edgar Allan Poe book. Does he make movies? Edgar Allan Poe book, where you had the dark lights, the dark skies and the lights on the sidewalks and on the streets, and there was a mist floating through the air. It was really cool. And we get inside the bar, and the place is jamming. I mean, it's packed. Waitresses bringing beers to every table, people ordering food, and I got to meet a lot of neat guys, a lot of guys from the academies, and of course I was with a Navy guy, so I met mostly Navy people, of course. My family's basically all Army, but we were with Navy folks, so I had to wear the blue and gold. You just go with what got you there, right? So I'm with the Navy folks, and I'm meeting all these former players. They play, and they have these button-down sweaters with the stars. The stars represent how many times they beat Army, along with some other achievements that they do athletically. And all these guys were ex-players mostly and athletes. and those who served, of course, after their college eligibility was finished and they had graduated from the academy. It's 5 years it's 5 years of service as an officer for everybody, for all of them. All those players on the game that played in the game who are graduating from their respective academies are now going to go serve for 5 years. So no NFL draft for them, no job at home waiting on them. They have a commitment now, so they go and do that. And then they come back or they stay and continue to do it for their life or whatnot. And these guys were really cool. I met doctors, I met architects, I met businessmen and women, and it was just tremendous to see all of the folks there and basically just kind of shaking hands and reliving the old days. So very welcoming community. And then we go tailgate at the Philadelphia Sports Complex, which is a tremendous place. You have the Wells Fargo Center where the Flyers and the Sixers play. You have Lincoln Financial Field across the parking lot. Down the parking lot, you have Citizens Bank Park, I think it is, where the Phillies play. And so you have these three venues all in one area, and a big bar restaurant and a huge parking lot. It's easy to get in and out of, and it's a great place for Philadelphia sports fans, and they have 4 professional franchises. So certainly a lot going on in that area just about every day during the year. So we're tailgating in the lot, tailgating with all the tents and people out there kind of reliving the old days, and the experience was tremendous, hearing the stories that they told and then asking questions about, like, what do you do, where are you from, blah, 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 and then getting to meet new people, exchanging business cards, and having a good time. Go into the game. We missed the march, when the cadets and the midshipmen march in to the stadium. They did it at 12 o'clock for a 3 o'clock game. Those poor kids had to sit there after they marched into an empty stadium, basically, what it amounts to. President Trump was there, and a lot of that had to do with that. So we have a phone. What do I do, Taylor? Just hit it? Let's see. We have a call in. I have a feeling this might be the QB. Shane?
JC.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Taylor. How's it coming through? All right, the connection is outstanding. Shane on assignment today, calling us from his automobile with where he is going. Shane, nice to hear from you. It works out pretty good. There you are.
Yeah, JC. Sorry I missed the show today. I'll be back in studio tomorrow. But how was your trip to the Army-Navy game?
So it's funny you should ask. I basically was telling the story. I've gotten to the point where President Trump rolls in, and the security is extremely congested, and I'm almost at the point where now we get to the game, QB. And by the way, the picture of you on the podcast that Taylor's pulled up it was during your glory days at Nice High School in your green shirt. There you are.
He needs to delete that.
Wait a minute. No, you need to keep that shot, because not only is your hair not gray like it is now, but you look 15 years younger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's plenty of other pictures he could have found on the internet.
I like that. Well, I didn't tell him which picture to pick, but anyway, Shay, you're with us. The Army-Navy game was an amazing experience. I really don't want to say it was much of a game because, well, the game itself wasn't that good. I've never seen a team go through 4 quarters without basically having the ability to throw a 10-yard pass downfield like I did. But I will have to.
You've watched Army-Navy games for many, many years.
Yeah.
They do not know what the forward pass is. So what made you think they were going to throw the football when you went?
Well, nothing made me think that, but I was shocked that they couldn't do that, especially when you're down 24-7 with a clock that seems to be continuously running, and you're trying to win a game, which I'm not really sure they were. I think they were just trying to get out of there. But frankly, it didn't feel like much of a game. It was more of an experience to go there this weekend in Philadelphia, Shane, where you basically ran into Navy and Army guys bumping into each other, reminiscing about the past, talking about their experiences. I met families that had Army and Navy representatives or people within them, their own family. I met 2 brothers, Bill and Matthew. Matthew went to the Navy, Bill went to the Army. All the stories that you hear on this weekend is what you take from it, as opposed to what happened on the field, because we all knew that game was going to be kind of very simple. It was going to be a simple game where they fight as hard as they can, they play as hard as they can, QB, but there's not a lot of sophistication. It wasn't like Joe Burrow running 4 verticals in a 4-minute offense trying to score a touchdown and put away the Texas Longhorns, if you know what I mean.
No, I mean, it had to be a great experience, though. It's one of the games that I really enjoy watching on TV every year, just because we all know that none of those kids will ever probably play football past, playing it at the collegiate level. There's a few that here and there that get a chance, but they play the game the right way. There's no dancing or doing all that stuff when you score a touchdown. There's no dirty play. It's just, I think it's very cool to watch, and all the festivities after the game that they show on TV. So, I think it's great that national TV, this is the only game that people have to watch. So it had to be a great experience, and I'm sure it was crossing off your bucket list, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. QB, between the two of us, we've seen so much football in our lives, and you certainly have played a lot. But I've watched games like Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan and Florida and Georgia and games like this. But when you bring it down to an Army-Navy level, it doesn't mean it's any less important to them. But I can tell you, I've also never been to a football weekend where I didn't hear one conversation, literally, about the game itself from any of the cadets or midshipmen who were there to watch the game from years, who have either played years gone by or were just going with their families to watch, because there really wasn't much to talk about. You had a team that was 9-2, you had a team that was 5-6, and basically there was really little doubt as who would win. But for those 3 hours that you were in the stadium when Army took a 7-0 lead, it was interesting in terms of what you and I would conventionally consider a football atmosphere, if you know what I mean. Because when we go to these games in the SEC, as you have known throughout your life, in many cases, in places like Auburn and Alabama and Gainesville and Baton Rouge, it's almost like a near-death experience. I mean, it's life or death. I may be overstating that a little bit, but you can tell that the passion and the energy is much different. In this instance, it was, hey, we scored, that's great. And now let's see if we can hold them. And if we can't, that's fine too, because, they're serving beer in the club level. So, or whatever. And, we'll get over it if they score. We'll try again on our next drive. It just seemed there was very little intensity. I mean, to me, it didn't seem that intense. Now, maybe it's because I'm not an Army or Navy guy. I never served or played. But it certainly did not feel like what it may have felt in Auburn when Alabama was there, or in Baton Rouge when Florida was there. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And, but it means a lot to those guys that are on the field. And,
oh, it does.
People that are involved with both military academies. And, they have bigger fish to fry than worrying about the outcome of football games. Where us at the SEC, that's all we worry about. That's our way of life. They're putting their lives on the line for us. So, well, it's great. It's great for college football. And like I said, I'm just glad that it's the only game, because obviously if this game was played, during the regular season, hardly anybody would watch it. Well,
here's what I did. This is something I did remember that I heard an Army guy say that was reiterated and by a Navy guy. And that was, this is the only game you'll ever go to where everybody who was playing in it or sitting in uniform at it would be willing to die for the rest of us watching it.
Well, when you put it like that, that puts it in perspective.
Oh, that it does, and that's absolutely the truth. And I that grabbed me, and I just wanted to hug the guy for his service. I mean, you really are around some elite and very different types of people that you don't typically see on a typical Saturday anywhere else. And the game itself was nice for 3 hours. They just want to beat each other's brains out. But at the end, when they sing each other's songs to each other's base of cadets and midshipmen. Once it's over, everybody's on the same team again, QB. So it's amazing. You do need to see it once in your life for sure. I would be happy and more than willing to go back if invited again. And I am very lucky and feel fortunate that, blessed that I was able to go and watch it in some really great conditions. It was going to rain very heavily, but it didn't. It held off. It was about 47 degrees. It was beautiful. Everybody was all dressed up in their outfits for their respective academies, and the president showed up, and so everybody was very happy with his reception. Well, his reception was very good in that stadium. I mean, I guess it would be when you're basically spending $700 some odd billion for the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and Marines and so forth. So I think defense spending. So I think it was a great day all around. Navy gets the win 31-7, and they will go bowling in the Liberty Bowl to play Kansas State. So good for Navy and Ken Niumatalolo to bring that team back from a really bad 3-year run that they had against the Army, who had won 3 straight prior to Saturday's game. QB, anything else for you before we let you go? The Heisman Trophy, Joe Burrow. What else?
Let me guess. You're not wearing your Army hat today, are you? Since they lost.
No, I've got the Dallas Cowboys on right now.
Oh, the Dallas Cowboys win. I'm sure you would have your Rams hat on if the Rams would have won.
Well, I don't know. The Cowboys have a real chance to win the division. They have to play Philadelphia to win that division. If they beat Philly, they do win the division. So more or less a playoff game for them. If they lose to Philly, they may not even make the playoffs. So we're going to talk NFL here shortly after the next break once we let you go. But
okay, before I go,
yeah.
The only thing I want to mention, JC, is I went and watched the Gators practice on Saturday morning.
Okay.
And what's amazing to me with the new NCAA rules is, we talked last week on the show about some commitments that may flip to Gators, especially the big offensive lineman Braun out of Live Oak Sewanee High School.
Yeah, was
committed to Georgia for the last year and a half. Well, John Hevesy and Dan Mullen flipped him on Wednesday, I believe. He committed to the Gators, and he was in full gear practicing for the Gators on Saturday, along with another offensive lineman and Anthony Richardson, the quarterback, it's just amazing. They get to go on the bowl trip and everything.
How is that?
It's a new NCAA rule. They've graduated, but I just think it's funny how this kid was committed to Georgia last Tuesday, and now he is practicing in full gear for the Mighty Gators.
Any inside tip on what tipped him?
Oh, he's an hour. What is Sewanee? Live Oak, about an hour and 15, 20 minutes from Gainesville.
True.
But Sam Pittman, who had been recruiting him, the offensive line coach, left Georgia, now the head coach at Arkansas. So, I mean, it was between the Gators and the Dogs, but it really helped when Sam Pittman left. But it's just crazy to me that these kids are practicing when they were in high school a few days ago, and now they get to enjoy the bowl game and everything. And let me tell you something. Florida is doing some good things on the recruiting trail, so it's only going to get better.
I would agree. It sounds very much like that is indeed the case. When is signing day? Do you know off the top of your head? Because I don't.
Yes, the early signing period is December 18th.
18th, right. Okay,
Wednesday.
So it's coming up on Wednesday, and Florida's looking at what, potentially 20 or 15 to 20 kids?
I would say they probably early signing period. I'd say around 20-ish, maybe more.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And they'll be in school in the next semester, I assume, and then off they go into spring practice, and then you have, of course, the traditional signing day in February. So things look very good right now at this time of year, which is very important. Fans don't typically, unless you're a diehard, talk about this that much, to the casual fan. But but a lot of important things are going on right now, and that's quite a story that you just gave us there with that Georgia commit who now turned to Florida and is going to be part of the team, just as if he had been here for the entire season. So anyway, I guess we'll let you go now and let you get ready for the things you have to do today, and then I assume we'll be visiting. We'll have you back tomorrow, correct?
Yep, I'll see you boys in the morning.
All right, Shane Matthews joining us live on the text line here on Pod Up with Shane Matthews, John Cornell with you this afternoon. this morning, and 8:30. I guess it would be this afternoon if we were in Europe. But 8:30 right now on a Monday morning, December 16th. We're going to take a little bit of a break here for a few minutes, and then on the other side, we're going to come back with some NFL discussion. I will discuss the day that was yesterday and what we have to look forward to as we get ready for the playoffs in January in the National Football League. Pod up. We'll be right back. Back on Pod Up with Shane Matthews, Johnny Cornell in on a Monday, December 16th. Good to have you with us. We do this every Monday through Friday now from 8 to essentially 9 o'clock. So we get ready for the holiday season. There will be some times when one of us won't be here, but we'll get through the holiday season, get ready for the bowl season, get ready for the NFL playoffs, and then of the college football championships. The semifinals and the finals coming up in just 12 days. 12 days. We have LSU and Oklahoma, Clemson, and Ohio State. Alabama, who played 5 straight years in this thing, not going to be there, but they will be playing on January 1st in the Citrus Bowl against Jim Harbaugh and the awful Michigan Wolverines. Shane Taylor, Shane did not like the picture you pulled up. I thought it was great, actually. I think he could have smiled. I mean, I don't know if he has any pictures where he's actually smiling, but if you find one, maybe from high school or something. But he joined us and mentioned some things that I was unaware of. The recruit who committed to Georgia and then switched and came to Florida is now practicing and going to the bowl game with the Gators down in Miami, the Orange Bowl, and maybe later in this week, and of course, as we get closer, we will start to talk about that game a little bit more in depth with Virginia. After watching that team lose by 150 points to Clemson, I know it's an important thing. It's going to be good for the Florida Gators. This is a huge reward for essentially a pretty good year, pretty darn good year, 10-2, couple of tough losses to LSU, of course, and Georgia, but winning the games that they were mostly expected to win. Kyle Trask basically becoming now the Gator quarterback via the injury to Felipe Franks. I wonder if, had that not happened, he would have played. But it seemed like to me, and I guess Shane would be more qualified to say this, but as a fan, I'm very qualified by saying I just liked him better with Trask. I don't know many folks who would say they didn't like him better with Trask, whether they're a former player or a coach or just a casual fan or more than a casual fan. I think the Gators were better with Kyle Trask, and I think most people would have absolutely agreed with that. So they play Virginia. They will be heavily favored. They are heavily favored, and that's in the Orange Bowl down in Miami, which, by the way, the stadium is a great place to watch a game. You get club-level seats right there in the middle, and you can do pretty much anything you want at the game. Plenty of parking, about a 5-hour drive down there from Gainesville, and a lot of Gator fans, I would hope, from Tampa and Orlando and throughout the peninsula will find their way down to support Dan Mullen and the Gators as they try to win 11 games and go into the offseason with tons of momentum. National Signing Day, December 18th. That's going to be where we basically lock up hopefully 15 to 20 players here at Florida, and more coming in February when they have National Signing Day. I believe it's the first Wednesday of the month. All right, so yesterday we had Week 15 in the National Football League. A lot of things happened yesterday. Two things that I just to this day can't believe happened, but do believe happened because it's the kind of thing that can and usually sometimes will happen at some point during the season in the NFL. And that was the Atlanta Falcons scoring 14 points in 2 seconds of game time. Now, obviously, it took longer than 2 seconds to score 14 points. But the Falcons scored 14 points in 2 seconds of game time by hitting a touchdown from Matt Ryan to Julio Jones to go ahead with 2 seconds left in regulation. Then, after a failed two-point conversion attempt, where the Falcons were up 23 to 22, they tried to make it 25 to 22, didn't make it. So on the ensuing kickoff with 2 seconds left, the 49ers get into a lateral game to try to pull off a miracle to win the game. Well, one of the Falcons jumped up in front of one of those laterals and took it back to the house. So they win 29-22. Now, what's the significance of this? Well, obviously it was a game San Francisco probably needed to win to keep up with Seattle for first place in the NFC West. But if you are partaking in a wager, let's say, of an over-under bet, and the total on that game was 48.5, and it's 23 to 22, and you have the under, with 2 seconds left, you're looking pretty good. In fact, when it was 22 to 17, you're looking really good with 2 seconds left. What happens is that 14 points get thrown up on the board in 2 seconds of game time, and the underbettors lose, and the overbettors who threw their tickets on the floor or in the garbage can or had lost all hope end up cashing. That's called a bad beat if you're on the under, which is fine because underbettors are angry bettors. And if you're on the over, it's Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, you win. So that happened. And then another instance in the Philadelphia-Washington game yesterday where the Philadelphia Eagles were beating the Washington Redskins, or beat the Washington Redskins 37 to 27. Well, they were losing 24 to 21. 24 to 21. They scored a touchdown with 18 some odd seconds left to go up 27 to 20. No, I'm just going to pull this up. They were losing they scored 20 points in the fourth quarter. Let me just get to the point. The point is they were favored to win that game by, they were favored to win that game by, bear with me here, 6.5 points. They were up by 3 with 18 seconds to go. So if you had bet on Philadelphia, you're losing that bet. And if you had bet on Washington, you're going to win that bet. There's 18 seconds to go. What does Washington do? They try to score with 9 seconds to go. And with 6 seconds to go, the quarterback gets hit, the ball gets fumbled, and an Eagle picks it up and runs, 50 some odd yards, 40 yards? How far did he go? He went 47 yards on what is basically the last play of the game. Nigel Bradham goes 47 yards. The Eagles then win by 10, and they cover. So you had a losing ticket with 18 seconds to go, and within 18 seconds of game time, you win a bet that you had no business winning, that you were going to lose anyway. So crazy things happen, and the Eagles won by 10. They were favored by 6.5. That, too, if you're a Redskin bettor, is a bad beat. And if you're a Redskin bettor, you deserve to lose. So we'll just say that. More importantly, some of these games had playoff implications. As I mentioned, the 49ers were tied with Seattle. They lose to the Falcons. Now, the 49ers had 3 starters in their defensive backfield that did not play, but they still had Garoppolo. They still had Tevin Coleman. They still had Kyle Shanahan calling plays, who ironically was the Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator when they choked away the Super Bowl. But at any rate, here they are, and they're playing the Falcons at home. That's a game they have to win, right? They want to get the 1 seed in the playoffs for the NFC. Now they're a 5. They go from 1 to 5. Why? Because Seattle beats Carolina. So Seattle now is a game up on San Francisco. Seattle has 2 games left, one of them against the 49ers, that the 49ers have to win. Otherwise, they go into the playoffs, believe it or not, as a 5 seed because of how messed up the NFL does its playoff seeding. And it is messed up. Why? Because here you have a Dallas-Philadelphia game coming up with 2 teams that are 7-7 that are going to play for a home playoff game in all likelihood this weekend in Philadelphia. And the winner will have the inside track with 1 game to play after this weekend. So if Dallas wins, they'll be in the playoffs as potentially an 8-8 team, and they'll be able to play a home game while you have the San Francisco 49ers, who could potentially be 13-3 or 12-4, and they'll be traveling for basically the entire playoffs. So it's just the way it goes in the NFL. I wish they would change that. I think they should. But that's important stuff for seeding in the playoffs. Green Bay beat Chicago 21-13. They look to be a lock, of course, in their division and get the 3 seed, which gives them a home game at Lambeau. Minnesota won a huge game at Los Angeles to beat the Chargers 39-10. I think the Chargers and Phillip Rivers turned the ball over 7 times. This is an NFL team playing in front of 25,000 fans that you can't even really call fans. There were probably more Minnesota Viking fans there. That is a lost organization, and Spanos, the owner, is the person you blame. Now, they'll be playing in a new stadium next year, but that stadium is really where the Rams are going to be playing. That's where they basically, I think, motivated. Stan Kroenke is the guy who built the place, all right? He's the Rams owner. So the Chargers lose again to the Vikings. So the Vikings now have the inside track on the other wild card. That would be the 6th position in the playoffs, basically assuring them of all road games if they survive in the playoffs. They could come back and be a 5 seed if San Francisco loses the next 2 games and they end up winning the next 2 games. They are 10-4, so they would go past San Francisco should the Niners lose, and be the 5 seed. But right now, what you're looking at is Seattle at 1, and this could change because again, Seattle has to play 2 more games as well. Seattle at 1. You would then have the number 2 team in the NFC, and that would be, in all likelihood, the Seattle would be 1. I'll get to it. The Packers will be 3, the Cowboys 4, either San Francisco or Minnesota 5, and the other would be 6. The Eagles could be 4-2 if they beat Dallas, and they have that opportunity at home this weekend. They really had no business winning that game against the Redskins yesterday. They were losing the entire day, literally losing the entire day, and came back and won that football game. And they basically really kept themselves alive for all intents and purposes in the NFC, or for the playoff spot. In the AFC, you've got New England at 2. You've got Kansas City at 3. You've got the Baltimore Ravens at 1, and then we have a kind of a chase for 4, 5, and 6 in the AFC. The Bills clinched a playoff spot last night by beating Pittsburgh. The Bills are 10-4. They won 10 games this year, and it was the first time they have won 10 games in 25 years, the Buffalo Bills. McDermott, the coach, what a great job he's done now. So he's brought that team and that city to a playoff scenario for the second straight year. Very impressive. Had 4 interceptions defensively against the Steelers yesterday. Steelers trying to get into the playoffs as well. Home game for them, and you got to tip your cap to the Buffalo defense. Josh Allen does just enough not to ruin his team. He does just enough to keep that team in the hunt, and there they are going to the playoffs once again. It's really a great story if you love the Buffalo Bills. So what we have is right now Baltimore 1 in the AFC. Let's see, number 2 would be New England. Number 3, Kansas City. Number 4 currently is Houston, who had a huge win over Tennessee yesterday. In Nashville, won by 3. They were up 14. Titans come back and tie it in the fourth quarter. Houston goes on to win with Carlos Hyde scoring a touchdown to end it and put them up by 3. Tennessee, time management, clock management, end of the game strategy, just a disaster, much like the Oakland Raiders, who aren't even worth mentioning on the podcast, who lose to Jacksonville in their final game in that dumpy Coliseum they play in. Buffalo is number 5, and Pittsburgh currently would be 6. So in the NFC, I had a brain lock. I couldn't figure out who the hell the second team was. Right now, and I was wrong about Green Bay, they would be the 2 seed. Right now, the Saints would be the 3 seed. The Saints play tonight against the Colts. I'm assuming they're going to win at home in the Dome. They would be the 2 seed if it all happened after tonight's game. Green Bay would be the 3. Seattle would be the 1. Minnesota would be the 6. Dallas 4. And San Francisco 5, which is amazing to me. But the Seahawks still haven't locked this thing up. And if they end up with a tie or the same record, so to speak, as New Orleans, the Saints would win the tiebreaker against the Seahawks. All of this will be cleared up after next weekend for the most part. Much of it will. But the Saints win a tiebreaker against Seattle because the Saints beat the Seahawks with Teddy Bridgewater. Remember that game where he basically replaced Drew Brees, who got hurt the week before in Los Angeles, where the Rams beat the Saints that day. And Teddy Bridgewater gets into the game against Seattle the following week, and they win at Seattle. So they would have the tiebreaker on any Seahawk tie. But right now it's Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans, Dallas, Minnesota, or San Francisco, and then Minnesota. Dallas and Philadelphia will be playing basically for that 4th spot this weekend at Lincoln Financial Field, which is where I was for the Army-Navy game on Saturday. It's a great place. It is a great sports complex. The stadium where the Eagles play is right literally across the parking lot from where the Flyers and the 76ers play in what is called Wells Fargo Center. And about 300 yards that way, you have the Phillies home ballpark. So it's a nice area for Philadelphia sports fans. They've had some success with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl a few years ago, and the Phillies winning the World Series in 2008, I think it was. So a couple of good things have happened to them. But that's where we are in the NFL. So the NFL yesterday, Jacksonville's playing Oakland. Oakland has this game basically locked up. It's 16-3. 16-3, playing at home. Clock's running out. Fourth quarter, Gardner Minshew just pulls it out of his you-know-what to pull back the Jaguars to spoil the final game in the iconic Oakland Coliseum. He threw 2 touchdowns to Chris Conley in the final 5 minutes of that game to get the Jacksonville Jaguars over the top against the Oakland Raiders, 20-16. The game was over. The Jaguars are 5-9. They drove 79 yards to draw within 3 when he hit his first pass to Conley, and then he hit another one. It's unbelievable how the Oakland Raiders could just give away a game. Derek Carr was ruled out of bounds with 2 minutes and 5 seconds to play, which essentially stopped the clock and gave Jacksonville another down, another timeout. Long story short, there was confusion. They ended up punting, Oh, I'm sorry. They ended up trying to kick a field goal, and Daniel Carlson missed not one, but two. Jacksonville, being as lousy as they are, tried to give Oakland a chance to win the game off the first missed field goal by Daniel Carlson. Well, Daniel Carlson was trying to kick a 45-yard field goal. I mean, this guy at Auburn, if he's playing Alabama, would have kicked a 75-yard field goal to win the game. Here he is playing for Oakland, the Raiders, and he chokes on a 45-yard field goal. Well, it turns out that Jacksonville, with 31 seconds left, ended up winning the game on a 4-yard touchdown pass to Chris Conley. Chris Conley had 2 touchdown receptions. I don't know if this makes you happy as a Jaguar fan. 5-9, Gardner Minshew, where do you go? Is it Nick Foles? Is it Gardner Minshew next year? I think it's going to be open tryouts to see who the starting quarterback is. Clearly, Nick Foles, the injury, he came back, was ineffective. That game I saw them play at Tennessee was ridiculously bad. And I don't know if next year he's going to be the starter. I think you have to give Gardner Minshew the benefit of the doubt right now. But that's right now and not next year. But the Jaguars could finish 6-10, 7-10, 6-10. They're 5-9 right now. They could finish 6-10. They could also finish 7-9. They could also finish 5-11. They are an awful football team, but they came back and ruined the final game for the Oakland Raiders in that awful Coliseum, which has a lot of history to it. But there's a reason why they're leaving to go to Las Vegas, and that is the biggest. So the poor Oakland Raider fan base, once again, goes to the altar and gets dumped. And they were dumped yesterday in a home finale against the god-awful Jacksonville Jaguars. So next week's Week 16 games start on Saturday. So you'll have Saturday football on the 21st. You'll have the Texans playing Tampa Bay, who, by the way, at 7-7, might be one of the hottest teams in the league, with Jameis Winston throwing four touchdown passes, 400-some-odd yards. It was a tremendous performance for a guy who's been maligned for much of the year and who's been really bad with the turnovers. 38-17, they beat Detroit. 7-7 now on the year is Tampa Bay. But Jameis threw 4 touchdown passes and over 400 yards and really protected the ball probably for the first time this season in a game where he only had 1 interception, 458 yards. Now, let's be honest, the Lions had a chance to have a pretty good year, but when Stafford got hurt and when they lost a couple of close games and when the officials screwed them in the Green Bay game, well, you knew that was going to be the end of the season for the Detroit Lions, and they're 3-10-1. But here's Tampa Bay at 7-7. I saw them a few weeks ago in mid-November lose to the Saints. They haven't lost since then. So Tampa Bay at 7-7 plays the Houston Texans. They could help Tennessee in the Colts perhaps in that AFC South Division. If they can knock off the Texans, that's on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, followed by Buffalo and New England. Those two teams playing for the division. Buffalo could beat them in New England. If that happens, maybe they get a home game for the first time in decades in Buffalo. New England beat Cincinnati yesterday, but this is a big game for Buffalo and New England. The Rams play the 49ers. 49ers really need to win to keep the pressure on Seattle to try to stay out of that 5 position. But I will tell you this, a healthy San Francisco team at the 5 position is a nightmare for for Philadelphia or Dallas in the 4. And I don't care where the game's being played. San Francisco is going to be favored in that game. The Falcons will play the Jaguars next week. You know, those are games where teams are just playing out the season and players are trying to keep jobs. Saints at Tennessee, big game there too. So we had a lot to talk about today, Army-Navy. We had Shane Matthews joining us on Pod Up today on a Monday. We talked about quite a few things. You can check us out on Facebook Live and YouTube, but I'm running out of time as I hear the music right now. So John Cornell signing off for Pod Up on a Monday. We will be back. Shane will be with me Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock. We'll see you guys then.